It was a cold, grim morning when the truth finally came out. My mother was in hospice, fighting her last battle with cancer. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of machines and the quiet murmurs of family. Everyone was waiting for the inevitable, but there was one thing I wasn't prepared for, something that would forever change the way I saw my own family. You see, my mom had always been a woman of grace, class, and impeccable taste. She'd collected fine jewelry over the years, gifts from my father, heirlooms passed down through the generations, and pieces she'd bought with her own hard-earned money. These weren't just pieces of gold and diamonds. They were memories, tangible reminders of her life, her love for us, and her strength. When she fell ill, I knew her health was declining. What I didn't know was that while she was slipping away, my family, my own relatives, had started making decisions behind my back. The one thing they could have easily respected, the one thing that should have been untouchable, was her jewelry collection. They didn't ask me. They didn't even tell me. They sold it all. Every last piece. The gold, the diamonds, the family heirlooms. They sold it while she was dying. I found out by accident, a phone call from a local pawnshop. They had an old ring of hers, something I remembered from my childhood, and they wanted to verify the sale. I froze when I heard the words. The ring had been sold. My mother's ring. The one my father gave her on their wedding day. I raced to the pawnshop, feeling the blood drain from my face as I heard more of the story. It wasn't just one piece. It was everything, and no one had bothered to ask me, the only child left, if I even wanted to keep anything that held a piece of my mother's legacy. But the real shock came when I took the remaining pieces of jewelry to an appraiser to find out just how much they were worth. I hoped, at the very least, that they had gotten a fair price. But when the appraiser looked at the collection, his expression shifted from professional to something else, something I couldn't place. He put down the last piece and looked up at me, his face pale. "Who sold you these?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard. "It was my family," I said, confused. "Why?" He hesitated, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the papers. "These pieces, they're worth far more than what you're being told. You've been underpaid by a lot." Before I could process the gravity of his words, he added, "You've been swindled." I felt my stomach drop. But what the appraiser said next would change everything, leaving me standing there, in complete shock. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. He looked at me with serious eyes. "You need to understand. These aren't just family heirlooms. These pieces are connected to something much more valuable. Whoever sold them to you wasn't just trying to get rid of jewelry. They were trying to erase a legacy." The tension in the room thickened. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew, in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. My mother's jewelry, my family's history, was more than just lost treasures. It was part of a much larger, more dangerous story. The appraiser's words echoed in my mind as I left his office. Holding the appraisal report that detailed the true value of my mother's jewelry, my family had sold those precious pieces for a fraction of what they were worth, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. But what the appraiser had said next, "These pieces are connected to something much more valuable," haunted me. I needed answers. How could my own family have sold these items without telling me? Had they been involved in something I didn't know about? The more I thought about it, the more questions flooded my mind. The jewelry wasn't just valuable because of the diamonds or gold. It was part of something much larger. I had always known that my parents had some wealth, but they'd never flaunted it. Their lives were modest, their home was comfortable, but we didn't live a life of excess. My mother had always preferred things that had meaning: her engagement ring, the earrings my father had bought her when I was born, the necklace that had been passed down through generations. Each piece had a story. As I sat in my car, the appraisal report in my lap, I felt a strange pull. My mind wandered back to my mother's final days. She had been so quiet in those last few weeks, almost as if she were holding on to some secret. I thought back to the conversations I had overheard in her room between her and my father before she passed. They had always spoken in hushed tones, but now I was beginning to realize they weren't just discussing mundane things. They had been talking about something else, something important. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the jewelry. This was about my family's past, my mother's past, and I had no idea what I was walking into. I decided to visit the house. It was still too early for anyone else in my family to be there. So I let myself in through the back door, the one my mother had always used. The house smelled of old wood and dust, but there was something else too. Something that felt ... wrong. I walked straight to the study, where my father had spent most of his time. There was a desk covered in papers, old bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, and the familiar sound of the grandfather clock ticking away in the corner. As I sifted through the papers on the desk, something caught my eye. A small, handwritten note that had been tucked into a drawer. I opened it carefully, recognizing my mother's handwriting immediately. The note read, "It's all connected. The jewelry, the legacy, and the truth. They won't stop until they get it back. Protect what's ours." My heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? What had she meant by "they won't stop"? Who was after my family? I turned the note over, hoping there would be more to it, but the back was blank. I looked around the room, my eyes scanning the walls for any other clue. It was then that I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Behind a painting, tucked into the wall, was a hidden safe. I'd never seen it before. I had to know what was inside. But as I reached for the safe, I suddenly heard footsteps coming from the hallway. My heart raced as I quickly pulled back, hiding the note in my pocket. It was too late to leave now. Whoever was coming, I had to face them, and whatever secrets they were hiding, I was about to uncover them. Before I could turn around, the door to the study creaked open, and I froze. A voice, calm and calculating, filled the air. "You've been digging around, haven't you?" I turned slowly to face the person standing in the doorway. It was my brother, Ben, his face as cold as I had ever seen it. "I knew you'd come here," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You should have stayed out of it." My breath caught in my throat. What had he meant by that? What was he involved in? And more importantly, what was he trying to protect? Before I could speak, Ben stepped into the room, his eyes locking onto the safe behind me. I could feel the tension between us thickening. The air charged with secrets I wasn't prepared for. "Ben," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "what is all of this? Why didn't you tell me about the jewelry? Why didn't you tell me what Mum was hiding?" Ben smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because, Lily, there's a lot more at stake than you realize. And it's time you learned the truth. But be careful what you wish for." I felt a chill run through me as I realized that whatever was hidden in this house and in my family's past was much darker than I could have ever imagined. And now, it seemed, it was too late to turn back. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as Ben stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I knew he was hiding something. He had always been good at keeping his secrets, but now I was in the dark, and I hated it. "What do you mean, Ben? What are you protecting?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the air was suffocating, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the answer. Ben didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes flicked toward the hidden safe behind me. I could see the cold calculation in his gaze, like he was weighing whether to tell me everything or keep me in the dark a little longer. "You don't understand what's really at stake here. Lily," he said finally, his voice low. "Mum was involved in something big. She knew things that I'm not even sure she should have known. But now, you've started digging, and that's a problem." I felt a chill run down my spine. My thoughts raced. What had Mum been mixed up in? What had she been hiding all these years? And why was Ben so calm about it? His reaction was as if he had already come to terms with something I wasn't yet ready to face. "You're not the only one with questions, you know," I snapped. "What did she leave me? Why didn't you tell me anything? I'm her daughter. I deserve to know the truth." Ben didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped further into the room, closing the distance between us. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you getting caught up in all of this, but now it's too late. You're already in over your head." His voice was strangely calm, even as his words carried an edge of warning. "You've opened the door, and now there's no closing it." I could feel my heart racing as I backed away from him, my eyes fixed on the safe. The way he was talking made it clear that he knew more than he was letting on. And that scared me more than anything. "You're not telling me everything," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "What's in the safe, Ben? What does it have to do with Mum?" For the first time, a flicker of something like guilt crossed his face. It was fleeting, but it was enough for me to notice. Ben was hiding something, and it had everything to do with what was locked away in that safe. "I can't explain everything right now," he said, running a hand through his hair, "but the safe contains everything that answers to questions that you're not ready to hear." "That Mum left behind? There are things in there that will change everything you thought you knew about this family." He paused, his gaze hardening. "I'm trying to protect you, but you have to understand, this isn't just about money. It's about control and power, and the things that people will do to keep both." The weight of his words hung heavy in the room, but I wasn't ready to back down. Not now, not when the truth was so close. "What are you talking about, Ben? I need to know." "Now," I demanded. Ben stood there for a moment, as if considering whether to continue. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The family isn't what you think it is, Lily. There's more to our legacy than just the inheritance. The safe, it's tied to something dangerous, something Mum never told you about, and now, you're going to have to decide whether you want to open it and face what's inside." I felt the air around me shift. The room seemed to close in as I took a step toward the safe, my hand hovering over the cold metal. Whatever was inside, whatever secrets had been locked away for so long, was now within my reach. But Ben's warning echoed in my mind. I wasn't ready. But was I ready to live with the uncertainty? To always wonder what was behind that locked door? Without another word, I made my decision. I turned the dial on the safe, the click of the lock sounding louder than it ever had before. With a final twist, the door creaked open. The contents inside were more than I could have ever expected. The first thing I saw was an old, dusty folder, its edges frayed from years of neglect. I pulled it out slowly, almost afraid of what might be inside. As I opened the folder, my heart skipped a beat. There were contracts, photos, and legal documents, things I didn't understand. But then, I saw a set of names. People I didn't recognize, names that were tied to huge corporations and political figures. These weren't just ordinary people. They were powerful, influential people who controlled far more than money. I turned the page, and that's when everything changed. There, written in bold letters, was one name I recognized: Ben Davis. I looked up at Ben, my hands shaking. "What is this? Why is your name here?" His eyes widened, his jaw clenched. "You weren't supposed to see that." Before I could say anything more, the door behind me opened with a creak. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted in the doorway. It was a man I didn't recognize, and he was holding a gun. "Time's up," he said, his voice cold. "Give me the folder." Everything inside me screamed to run, but I was paralyzed, the weight of the moment freezing me in place. Now I understood. This wasn't just a family matter. It was a game of power, a game that I was now unwillingly a part of, and it was about to get a lot more dangerous. The man in the doorway didn't move, his figure casting an imposing shadow across the room. My heart raced as I tried to keep my hands from shaking. But the cold metal folder I was holding seemed to burn through my fingers. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs were frozen, rooted to the spot. The man's cold, calculating eyes locked on mine, and I knew there was no way out. "Give me the folder," he repeated, his voice low and steady, like he had all the time in the world. I glanced at Ben, who was standing frozen beside me. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with an expression I'd never seen before. The cool, confident demeanor he had earlier was gone, replaced by something far more vulnerable: fear. "This is none of your business," Ben said quickly, his voice tight with desperation. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The man's lips curled into a cold smile. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. You don't. I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The gun in the man's hand gleamed in the dim light, its presence a stark reminder of just how serious this was. But it wasn't the weapon that terrified MIT, was the look in his eyes. I knew immediately that this was no ordinary criminal. This was someone with power, someone who had been waiting for this moment. For a long time, Ben, I whispered, barely able to speak. What is this? Who is he? Ben didn't answer, his gaze locked with the man in the doorway, calculating his options. You need to leave. Now, he said, his voice forced. But I could hear the edge of panic behind it. The man stepped forward, his hand outstretched. The folder, Mr. Davis, or I'll take it from you. Ben took a step back, his breath ragged. It was clear he wasn't going to fight back. He was trapped. And I was right there with him. I turned to the folder, the contents inside still overwhelming my thoughts. It wasn't just about the money or the land, it was about something far bigger. Something dangerous. I knew that this moment, this decision, would change everything. My whole life had been a lie, and this man, with his gun and his cold stare, was the link to the truth. But as my fingers tightened around the folder, a new thought struck me. What if this was my only chance to take control? What if handing the folder over meant I'd never get the answers I needed? My eyes darted to the door, looking for an escape, but the man had closed it quietly behind him, blocking the only way out. There was no easy escape. Don't do it, Lily, Ben pleaded, his voice breaking. If you give him that, there's no going back. I felt my pulse quicken. I wasn't just fighting for my future anymore, I was fighting for my family, for the truth behind all of this. The fear in Ben's voice made me realize how deep the hole went. There were secrets that went far beyond the family business. Suddenly, the man moved forward again, his hand still outstretched. Enough talk. I'm not asking any more. I looked at Ben, seeing the silent plea in his eyes. But then I looked back at the man in the doorway, the man who had answers. Something inside me snapped. I tossed the folder on the table, a feeling of defiance rising in my chest. Take it, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. But I want answers, and I want them now. The man paused, his fingers hovering over the folder. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Then, without another word, he grabbed it. His eyes flashed with something that could have been Respitor. Something much darker. As he walked toward the door, he paused and looked back at me. You'll get your answers, but not the way you think. I felt the chill of those words as he left, leaving me standing there with Ben. The room felt cold, the air thick with unspoken tension. Ben finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You shouldn't have done that. I turned to face him. Why? What's going on, Ben? What aren't you telling me? His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, I wondered if I had just made a terrible mistake. But as I looked at him, something in his eyes shifted, almost like a flicker of regret, a hint of guilt. They'll come for you now, he said. And they'll come for me, too. I stood there, trying to process his words, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, I had crossed a line, and the world I thought I knew was about to come crashing down. The truth was closer than I'd ever imagined, but it was coming at a cost. The door clicked shut behind the man, and I stood frozen, staring at the spot where he had been just seconds ago. The weight of what I had just done hit me all at once. I had given him the folder, the one piece of my father's legacy that had tied everything together, the one thing that had been keeping me connected to this tangled mess of lies and secrets. But as the adrenaline began to wear off, something inside me shifted. A creeping doubt crawled up my spine. Did I make the right choice? Was handing over that folder my only way to uncover the truth? Or had I just sealed my fate? Ben was still standing across from me, his eyes fixed on the door, his jaw tight with anger. He hadn't moved since the man left, and I could tell the storm inside him was about to break. You have no idea what you've done, he said, his voice low but tinged with desperation. I took a step toward him, my own frustration bubbling over. You've been hiding things from me, Ben, this whole time, and now you're telling me I've made a mistake? I don't think so. I had to know what was going on. You've known about this for years, and you've kept me in the dark. Ben ran a hand through his hair, his face hardening. You don't understand. This isn't just about the company or money. This is about power that's been in our family for generations. And once you open that door, once you get involved with these people, there's no going back. The finality in his tone made my heart race. What do you mean? Who are these people? He hesitated, his eyes darting away as if he were debating whether to tell me the full truth. Finally, he met my gaze. They're connected to everything Carter Ventures, our family's wealth, our legacy, and they'll do anything to control it. You're not just dealing with a business. You're dealing with an empire, Lily. I felt a cold shiver run through me as the weight of his words sank in. Empire. It wasn't just about what Dad had left behind, it was about something much darker. Something I had no idea was lurking beneath the surface of our family's history. I don't care about the empire, I said, my voice shaking with anger and determination. I want the truth. I want to know who Dad was really working for. I want to know what he got us involved in. Ben closed his eyes, a look of regret flashing across his face. You don't understand. You think you're doing the right thing, but you're only making it worse. Once you're in, there's no way out. And there's a reason they came for the folder. You don't know what's inside, what it's connected to. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. This wasn't over. I could feel it. And as the door creaked open once again, I braced myself for whatever was coming next. A new figure stepped into the room, tall and imposing, with a calm expression that did nothing to ease my nerves. He wasn't like the man from earlier, no. This man was different. His presence radiated power, and his eyes locked onto mine with unsettling certainty. I hope you've made the right decision, he said, his voice smooth and calculated, because now, there's no turning back. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Who was this man? What did he want from me? Ben stepped forward, trying to block my view of the stranger. You don't need to be here, Ben said, his voice hard. Leave her out of this. The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. You've already involved her, Ben. And now, it's time for her to understand what she's gotten herself into. The stranger reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another set of papers that looked identical to the ones I had just handed over to the other man. These were fresh, though new, and they had my name on them. Sign them, he said simply, holding the papers out toward me. I stared at the papers, confusion and fear flooding my mind. What is this? This is your future, Lily, the man said, his tone cool and indifferent. The moment you handed over that folder, you made a choice. Now, we're going to seal it. The words felt like a trap, and I wasn't sure if I could trust any of them. But as I looked at Ben, his face pale and resigned, I knew something deeper was happening, something far bigger than I could have imagined. Sign the papers, the man repeated, or things will get much worse for you, your family, and anyone you care about. I stood frozen, my mind racing. What was in those papers? What did they want from me? The choice was mine. And just like that, my life was no longer mine to control. Before I could make a decision, Ben stepped forward, his voice hoarse with emotion. Lily, don't, please, I never wanted this for you. But it was too late. I reached out, grabbed the pen, and made my mark. As I signed my name on the dotted line, I could feel the weight of the decision settling in. I was stepping into a world I couldn't control, a world that had been set into motion long before I even realized it. And as I signed away my future, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again.